Lokati here. Today we're going to be going over our Berserker Glacial Hammer of Shattering Flicker Strike build. This is an incredibly fun mapper with great boss potential through the use of two 6-link skills to maximize the return on your investment on the character. This build, like all of our builds, as our viewer Naughty Kettle would say, is budgeted from zero to the sky. So you can start off on a very low budget on this build, and you can spend as much currency as you want to it to scale it. And we offer options for both ends of the spectrum. All right, let's take a look at some boss skills on this Berserker. Go delete that, boss. Now on our POB here, we're just going to be looking at 4 basic options. The first one is going to be an early budget build. On the early budget build, we are using a very cheap Valhoa's Felling Pile Driver, a helmet that you can craft with an empty base and an intelligence essence slam, Kaom's Heart, which you can have for probably, I don't know, 10 or 15 chaos right now. Some gloves you can craft with a single attack speed slam and then keep hitting it until you get life on it. Boots that we're going to just craft with regular crafting, reforged life, or just buy a pair of boots off of the market. These rares are like 2 to 5 chaos rares. They're very cheap. We're using a 1 chaos Carnage Heart, 5 to 6 chaos Taming Rings, and then a belt that's got like some health and some resistances on it. Nothing big here. We're running a flask for life and the silver diamond topaz sapphire for defenses, and then we've got some cheap jewels. Just have some life on them and then have something useful on them. Nothing here is complex. The character's set at level 85. You've got 6,000 health with 5,700 unreserved, and you're doing 2.5 million DPS with Glacial Hammer. It just smashes. Now we're not going to switch over to a dual 6-link until we're in the higher budget end of the build, because the Kaom's Heart is such a powerful low-end body armor for us, while we have the ability to maintain a single 6-link on our weapon. And so this is definitely a way to go for the early and the mid budget on the build. As far as skills go, Assassin's Mark on hit, Blood Rage, Leap is our movement skill, Berserk as a cooldown for damage, Precision linked to Arrogance, Determination and Wrath are our 2 auras that we're going to be running. And then our Glacial Hammer is going to be linked with melee Fizz damage, Fizz to lightning, elemental damage with attacks, multi-strike, and Trinity. Now we're running Fizz lightning on the Glacial Hammer in order to guarantee that we hit our Trinity marks, and so that is a requirement in there. The rest of these you can move around if you have a different preference on how you want to gear out the support gems on your Glacial Hammer. Now our tree is going to remain fairly stable throughout the build. We're going to take traditional Marauder stuff down here with health and stats here. We'll go down here and pick up our elemental resistances, go across here for armor. We'll go down here to pick up endurance and frenzy charges, armor and evasion mastery, life everywhere we can get life. And we have Mana Leech and Leech on hit is instant right here. Mark Mastery for more accuracy and Culling Strike down here. We do have Tribal Fury with Attack Mastery for non-ball strikes and splash. We have Fortify on hit right here from our Fortify node. And then we're running all the rage nodes that we can that fit in the tree. And then all the way up to Divine Judgment with Inversion to scale our elemental damage. All right, now we'll take a look at our mid-budget guide for the build. Now, equipment is relatively unchanged. We're still using Valhoa's Felling Pile Driver. We do have a well-crafted helm with implicits on it, well-crafted gloves with implicits on it. Still using Kaom's Heart, and we have added Ralakesh and Arns for the Endurance Charge, Brutal Charge synergy here, and a Yoke Taming Interrogation for the ailment damage multipliers that these items offer. Now we're running a double taming right here because we have the life necessary to do that without taking the life from the ring, but we are a little bit more susceptible to chaos damage, so you'll have to be careful with chaos degens and poison. We have added a tincture to the mix for some increased damage, and no longer using life flask and silver diamond topaz sapphire as supports. And then we do have a lethal pride as well. The lethal pride is giving us damage, life, and intimidate on hit, which is a great way to scale our damage. Now in the mid-budget build, we are spending probably around, I would say about 10 div spent here. So we're about 10 div into this, including the large cluster, which is not an expensive cluster. So 10 div for 17 million DPS. Very, very, very respectable place to be in the game. Now for our skills, not much has changed. We are still running Precision Arrogance, Assassin's Mark on Hit. We are still running Leap Slam with Blood Rage Berserk. We've added Vengeful Cry for an additional cooldown so you can scale your damage when you take a big hit, especially when you're fighting bosses. We have added Enlighten to summon Skitterbots, Flesh and Stone, and Determination. And then our Glacial Hammer of Shattering is virtually the same here. Now our tree is mostly the same. We have only added the cluster wheel down here, made a few small changes in pathing. We have added Inexorable over here, and we also are going to need to have our fortification on hit. And so this tree will scale you up to level 96 to get going on the character and start being able to really sit down and farm some gear so that you can build out a higher budget version of the build. Now this is the live version of the build. This is what I played in some form or fashion or some level of equipment in the build guide video itself. The most expensive thing here is going to be your Hypnotic Grinder, which is your mace. You can either use a pile driver or you can use a Colossus Mallet. The Colossus Mallet is actually a better weapon, but the pile driver is what I had a fractured base on that I could craft on. So you're going to spend anywhere from 5 to 15 div on a fractured base. You're going to spend another 5 to 15 div on essences to get a high rolled fizz and a flat fizz damage on the weapon. And then you're going to spend another 5 to 15 div on crafting the attack speed and additionally veiling it or just crafting increased critical strike chance on the back of it. And so this weapon is going to cost you anywhere from 45 div to 100 div depending on how you are setting the character up. But this weapon makes the character. If we upgrade from this weapon from Tauhoa's Felling Pile Driver and do nothing else to the build, it is a 180 million DPS upgrade. This is no sketchy configurations, nothing squirrely going on with the character. This is just really what a big two-handed mace with 45% of weapon physical damage as extra damage of each element can actually do for your character. Now you don't have to start off with this big of a mace. You can get a smaller one first and work your way up. But this is what the center point of the build is all about. And this is a real 220 million Glacial Hammer of Shattering DPS with very reasonable budgeted gear. Your helmet here is going to be a self-crafted helm. Again, you're probably going to spend anywhere from 5 to 15 div crafting this helm. You're going to spend anywhere from 10 to 15 div crafting this armor right here. You're going to spend anywhere from 5 to 15 div crafting these gloves here. We have a Ralakesh and a yoke, just as the par. You can get a better yoke than this. This is just what I was using. A 10% yoke would elevate the build up 240 million DPS. This is a big taming that has catalyst on it. This is a handcrafted amethyst ring with a fractured LE damage with skills and an essence slammed global crit strike multi. Digging for life and resistances. This is an Arn's Anguish that is catalyzed for fire resist to help hit our resistances. And then we do, of course, have a Tincture, a Silver Flask, a Diamond Flask, a Lion's Roar, and a Progenesis for defenses. We are using another Cluster Jewel that includes Overlord as well as Devastator. So we now have Fortify on hit on our Jewel. And we have AoE Explosions. This Cluster Jewel is typically going to be about 8 to 10 div to get a hold of. And then we just have a 2 div DPS jewel here that has some life on it. And then we have a Storm Shroud with Hypnotic Jewels so that we can hit our shock percentages for element immunity. An Impossible Escape for some additional skill point shenanigans on the tree, as well as a Thread of Hope right here. So this whole budget right now is probably going to run you between 150 and 250 div, depending on your level of crafting and the availability of items on the market. But that 150 to 250 div gets you an absolutely tremendous amount of damage, very respectable survivability, and a very, very fun character to play. Now for our skills, we are mixing things up a little bit, but Assassin's Mark on hit is standard, Berserk and Leap Slam are standard. Flicker Strike of Power is added for additional clear. Now Flicker Strike of Power is going to be used for just killing mobs on the map and moving around on the map itself. This is not set up for bossing, especially not in this level of gear, because you're not going to be able to reliably maintain power charges through this. And so you will need to Flicker Strike occasionally, and then Glacial Hammer occasionally whenever Flicker Strike is on cooldown. So we are essentially treating Flicker Strike as a Leap Slam that destroys everything on the screen with 117 million DPS. Now Precision ties with Arrogance again. Glacial Hammer of Shattering has a few changes in the skill nodes here. We're using Trauma Trinity elemental damage with attacks, awakened elemental or awakened melee fizz damage, and fizz to lightning again to maintain the trinity. And then we are running Flesh and Stone, Determination, Enlighten, and Summon Skitterbots, a very standard setup here. Now our tree has a few changes on it. We added a second cluster jewel here. We did drop Inexorable, so the only way that we can generate endurance charges for Arn's Anguish in a mapping situation is either endurance charge on kill or weapon swapping over to Red Blade banner with Enduring Cry and Urgent Orders bound into it. And so when there's no targets around or you're going into a boss, you'll just weapon swap real quick and pop on your endurance charges, and then you will have 10 seconds to kill the boss before you have to do that again for more endurance charges. And 10 seconds is probably going to be enough. The other changes we made to the tree here are the inclusion of the Thread of Hope here, which allows us to get this rage, max rage here without having to go into Veteran's Wrath and rage on hit here. We get to pick up versatility without having to go to accuracy here. We get to pick up Blacksmith's Clout and Mace Crit Strike Multiplier here. And then we also have the option of going into Bone Breaker here if you want even more damage. But this was set at level 94 because that was the level of the character that we were playing. Up here we do pick up an additional power charge, so we have a little bit more leeway with Flicker Strike of Power here. And same thing, we go for Inversion and Divine Judgment here. Now, if you really like the Flicker Strike Power and play in maps, you do have the option of using two different pieces of gear. We're going to use a Feral's Fur to get us power charges reliably. And we're going to use Wyvern Scale Gauntlets to get us the aspect of the cat at the loss of the attack speed. This will allow you to do a tremendous amount of damage with Flicker Strike of Power. And we have a little bit of a different way that we can play the game with more reliable power charges available and more reliable cleared strictly through the use of Flicker Strike. And then we can also use these last 5 points here to either scale our defenses or scale our damage as we get our character going up. Now, as you see, you do lose some Fizz Max Hit here because the Feral's Fur is not nearly as powerful as the Conquest Lamellar is. And so you go from a 21k Fizz Max Hit to a 16k Fizz Max Hit here. And your effective health pool stays relatively the same because of the benefits provided by Feral's Fur itself. But you do have some really solid options for a very powerful offensive Flicker Striker and still maintaining a solid layer of defenses on the character. Now we are mostly relying on elemental max resistances for spells. We do not have a large source of spell suppression. If you have an opportunity to include some on your gear, that is good. And if you really want to, you could re-gear this character towards spell suppression and get spell suppression cap. But this is not something that's included in this guide. We're relying on health and elemental resistances to deal with spells, and we're relying on armor, evasion, and life leech to deal with incoming fizz hits and fizz damage over time. But you will not be able to face tank everything in the game with this. You do need to be aware of boss mechanics and dance around and smash them. But as you saw in the video, smashing bosses is not a challenge. Now, if you have any questions on this or you need any help with the build, leave a question or a comment down below, or just come by the Twitch channel and ask. It's so much easier for me to look at your POB, point out areas that you can improve, or point out mistakes that you made in building your character than it is to answer questions, and I can do it in a much faster fashion. And so other than that, thank you very much for watching the video. Y'all have a wonderful day wherever you are. Peace. Alright y'all, thanks for watching the video. As always, come by Twitch if you have any questions, or check out this video that YouTube thinks you like, or check out our latest upload over there. Peace.